Hey, thanks for tuning into my podcast. This is Big Head on the Block, hosted by me, Tim Henderson, aka Big Head. You can run, but you can't hide. It's me, Big Head. And guess what? We're going to talk about great escapes. We're going to talk about how we got duped, how the bad guys escaped our custody, and then eventually how we apprehended them. And let me just start out by saying this. Sometimes officers, when they're young, inexperienced, or distracted, sometimes we lose focus on the objective of securing our prisoners. Or I'm going to tell you one story about a prison escape. So we lose focus and we don't always pay enough attention once we have somebody in custody. And these stories, it's gonna be several stories, and what we're gonna do, we're just gonna touch on them and hopefully give you a little bit of humor and let you see the lighter side of policing. Now, it's very impactful when it happens, because whenever people escape your custody, you are responsible for them, and you are responsible and subject yourself to disciplinary action up to and including termination. So an escaped prisoner, an escaped inmate, whatever the case may be, however you want to term it, is very serious situation for police. So it's not something that we take lightly whenever it happens, right? So just know this: you might escape, but we're going to find you. We're going to track you. We're going to hunt you. We're going to do whatever we can, but you always going to get caught. Everybody gets caught. Ask Whitey Bulger. He ran and hid from the U.S. Marshals for decades, and he was caught. You can run, but you can't hide, like I said in the beginning. So all you little knuckleheads who tried to make life hard on us by running, by trying to escape, every one of y'all was captured. So my first story goes back to 1990. I was working at the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison, and I was assigned to work a maximum security DOC line. Not maximum security, just a DOC line, which is inmates that have DOC time. Well, there was another deputy who was a young deputy, and eventually he came and said, "Hey man, I'm short on my count." And I'm like, "What you mean?" And there was a few of us there, and he said that he was short one man, like if he's supposed to have 30, he only had 29. So at that point in time, it's been so many years ago, I don't remember the sequence. Like I said, it was like 90 or 91. We had to notify everybody of what occurred. And eventually this inmate had escaped, and he was on the inner perimeter he never escaped the actual prison. He was still on the inner perimeter of the prison. He made it to the rooftop in some capacity. And then later that night, I think he tried to jump over the razor wire, and he got caught up in the razor wire, which, from what I remember, he was hanging there hoping that somebody would come get him. So eventually he was reapprehended, and I don't know for sure, but I know that they charged him with attempted escape. So usually that's a couple of years to a sentence. So I don't know what he was in there for, but I do know this: he tried to run, he tried to escape, and eventually he was apprehended. And look, for this deputy, I could tell you this: there's an extreme amount of stress whenever this happens. There was a lot of us who stayed after shift to look for this guy because, we were trying to make sure he got captured, because we didn't want this deputy to ultimately get in trouble. It's something. These inmates 24/7, they got nothing to do but focus on trying to, further their cause. And his cause was to escape. So there's no telling how long he planned and watched and schemed. But, ultimately he never made it out of the prison. So kudos to the security element at the East Baton Rouge Sheriff Prison and everybody who was involved in that apprehension. My next story centers around a incident that happened on LSU's campus when I was an LSU cop. So I was an LSU cop from September 91 to December 96. So I think it was probably around 92, 93. I can't remember. But I was a young cop at the time as far as having street experience, because I didn't have any street experience at the parish prison, right? I was a jailer. And once I got to LSU, then I learned the techniques of being a patrol officer. I went through the academy and everything. So anyway, I'm cut loose. Big Red, Richard Buckland, he's working the cameras at the Union, and he finds multiple people that are actually stealing a lot of stuff from the LSU bookstore. So we had a massive camera system there, and Big Red was really good at not only finding these guys, but detailing to us the direction of travel. So one guy comes out. He fits the description of one of the guys that Big Red told me about. I was able to take him into custody with just a little struggle. I put him in the back seat of my car, which was parked right outside, but we still had other people that we needed to try and apprehend. So another guy crosses my path. I take off running after him, and I'm still relatively young and in decent enough shape. So I start running after him. I leave my unit and I leave the bad guy in the back seat. We run across the parade grounds, which if you know anything about LSU, it's a pretty damn long run. Run down Highland Road, cross Highland Road, and I catch him somewhere back in a alley. And I wasn't by myself. There were several officers because the whole LSU Police Department responded, including the chief of police. So we catch the second guy, and when the chief of police comes, I'm walking back to my unit. I jump in his because we still got one more person, and the chief is, he's driving me and a couple of other officers around. I need to get back to my car. And what's funny is we needed to get back toward the Union pretty quickly because we still had one guy in that area running. So I told the chief, cut through the parade ground. There's an actual concrete path with a flag, and then you can get toward the Union. And he was like, what? I said, yeah, just cut through here. That's the path that we take now, as opposed to driving all the way around and taking a whole lot longer, right? So he did. We got to the Union. I don't remember if we caught that third guy or not, but we had two in custody, or so we thought. I walked back to my unit, which was parked there, nice, clean, looking good, still running, and the back seat's empty. And I'm like, oh my God. So I'm asking other people, hey man, did anybody take the prisoner out of my car? They like, no. So Big Red had to go back and look at his cameras, and somebody decided to let him out, which indicates to me that I probably didn't lock my door, right? So I got distracted trying to make that additional apprehension. Then I got distracted in the foot chase, left my unit running and unlocked, and somebody thought it was okay to come let this guy out. Eventually, we caught him and was able to rebook him because he did have handcuffs on. So it wasn't like he was going to be able to go everywhere forever, right? Somebody's going to see this fool with handcuffs on and turn him in. Now, I don't remember how we got him, so I can't allude to that in this podcast, but just understand this. My heart dropped when I saw that empty back seat. It was like, oh my God, because all I could think about is now I'm going to get fired. I'm thinking about all the negative things that's going to happen, but luckily the chief didn't make a big issue out of it. He did say the next morning, he actually put out a memorandum saying that we need to all make sure that we in good physical condition because there was a lot of us that ran a long way and we were tired. And I think he underestimated the amount of ground that we covered when we were running, right? But he did say, let's make sure we keep our physical activity up and that we stay in shape. But at least he wasn't focused on the prisoner escaping my unit. So let's move to my next job. I spent the last 24 and a half years with the Baton Rouge City Police Department where I retired as a lieutenant. However, in probably early 97, there was a bunch of us on squad who was real active. We were real proactive. We were out here hitting the drug dealers. We were out here hitting people on the streets, trying to get guns, weapons, whatever we can, trying to make quality of life better for the people we had. I don't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure that it was me, Troy Lawrence, Ralph Palmer, and then Marlon Harris, a.k.a. Shorty Red, and Lawrence Miller, a.k.a. Butch. We were all in the area, and Troy and I made an apprehension of one guy, but we had one suspect that got away. So we were in a neighborhood, and we had him confined to probably 4 or 5 houses. So we kind of we set up a little small perimeter, had to do a little house-to-house search. But in the meantime, I told Troy to make sure his door was locked because remember the story I just told you? I didn't want anybody to come let this fool out of the car because we weren't going to be far away from the car, but we were going to be far enough to where it wouldn't be in view the whole time. So Troy had the door locked. Everything's good. We're out here looking for this other suspect. I don't remember if we caught him or not because it's been way too many years ago, but this is what I remember. As we're walking back to the car, we see glass on the ground. we see an empty back seat, and we see a little blood around the glass area, right? So we understand in one thing. This fool who was handcuffed has somehow made his way out of this unit. Now, there's only a couple of ways out of a unit when you're handcuffed. Just imagine, if you will, you sitting in the back seat of a police car with your hands handcuffed behind your back. You kick out the window. Now, people kick out windows all the time, so that's not unique. But people don't usually kick windows out to escape. They usually kick it out because they're mad and they just trying to incite us or piss us off, right? But this particular guy, he was looking for an avenue of escape. So he kicks the window out, and I'm guessing really the only way he could have got out was to kind of crawl face first. And with there being blood on some of the short glass, that was still intact in the window area, he cut himself pretty good. He had to fall face first out of that car. Now, just imagine how high that is. Imagine you not being able to brace yourself from the fall because your hands are behind your back, right? So this guy wanted to get away pretty bad. So I'm guessing he face planted when he came out because there's really no other way to get out. But he did get away. I don't know how he got away, but he got away. And eventually we were able to apprehend him. But let's go back to the window. Just to show you what a pain in the rear it is. This situation is we got an escapee we got to find. Eventually we found him. But now Troy has to deal with weather situations, right? Because he has a back window that's kicked out. We work evening shift in Scotlandville, which is from 3 in the afternoon till 1 in the morning. And guess what? How's he going to get his window fixed this time of night? So now he has to patrol with a broken window for the next 6-8 hours, whatever the case may be. Hope it don't rain. And then eventually he has to drive this unit and get a new window the next day or the day after, whatever the case may be. And back then, it wasn't quite as easy to get, you couldn't call Safe Glass to come out and do your window right there. So this guy was very disruptive to not only that day, but the next day. It's one of them things where you chalk it up to a lesson learned. And like I said, we were able to reapprehend him. So it all worked out for the good guys. Now this next one, this one was funny, man. This is something you can't hardly make up. So I'm detaining a guy. I hadn't handcuffed him yet. So he makes his great escape by getting away from me before I get him handcuffed. And this is a very funny story. So he takes off running. We're on Scotland Avenue. He takes off running towards Scenic Highway. I'm in foot pursuit with him, and I'm barely keeping him in sight. He's fast. I'm not. So as I'm chasing him, he left his car, right? So the first thing I had to do was take the keys out of the car because they will double back on you. So he had a decided advantage already because once I took the keys out of the car, that took a few seconds to get that and to make sure he couldn't double back and get back in the car because they will double back on you and haul butt. Well, I'm behind him. I'm calling it out, and it's a big field, and there's a lot of people in the area, thank goodness. The first person that's in the area is my sergeant, Leo Lamont. Well, Leo Lamont, as I'm telling him which way the guy's running, Leo sees him come out to Scenic Highway, and there was another vehicle heading north. I don't know if this guy just happened to see his homeboy running from the police, but he stopped and picked this guy up. Now, Sergeant Leo Lamont at the time, he starts taking off, and he indicates that they're in a vehicle pursuit now. So they decide that both of them are going to run now. So whoever this guy that picked him up, he done got himself caught in a trick bag, right? Eventually, they bail off into one of the side streets. They bail out of the car, and 2 of them are running now. So we got the guy who ran from me. Then we got the guy who picked him up, who bailed out of his own car after he's trying to rescue this guy, right? So eventually we take them both into custody, and both of them are charged. But the funny thing about this whole situation is, how random is it that a guy's running from me? He gets a little advantage as far as distance. He jumps in another car, just randomly happened to be one of his homeboys riding down the street, picks him up. They take off running. They realize they're not going to outrun Leo Lamont, so they bail out. And ultimately, 4th District soldiers. Bro, stupid, if you're listening, we was the soldiers in Scotlandville before we allowed you to run that area. That's right. So chalk another one up to the good guys. We got a 2-for-1 on that one. Now this next one, this is pretty funny. except for the guy who let him get away. I see a stolen vehicle. I make a stop. I take 2 people into custody. Well, I wasn't close to my unit at the time, so we put both people in the back of the assisting officer's unit. I had to call EBO or sheriff department because the car was stolen through them. We were going to handle the arrest, but we needed them to handle the actual recovery of the vehicle, and they were able to send a unit out there. Well, both of the guys had been detained in the other officer's unit, right? One was about 300 pounds and one was light. He was probably 140 pounds at the most. So the big guy took up a lot of the back of the unit. Well, during the course of searching this vehicle, they were looking for an item that was stolen during the actual auto theft. And the guy in the back seat, the smaller guy, he indicated to them that it was in the trunk. So they went and looked in the trunk. They couldn't find it. And when they came back, they had rolled down the window to talk to him. So they rolled the window back up. Well, unbeknownst to the officer, his window locks weren't secured from the front driver's seat, right? You have to lock those windows so they can't open them or roll them up and down. Well, the window lock was unlocked. This guy, as the officers are looking in the trunk, they focused on digging in that trunk because, like I said, they focused and they ain't paying attention. And it's not uncommon not to pay that much attention. You got the car locked. You don't think anybody's going to get out. Well, they didn't think nothing of it. They couldn't find whatever they were looking for, from what I remember. Eventually, he transported them back to the precinct. When he got back to the precinct, I hadn't made it there yet, but I made it there a few minutes later. And when I saw him, he came out the back door and he's like, bro. And I'm like, what's up? He said, man, one of the guys got away. I said, what are you talking about? He said, man, when I drove up, I didn't notice because the big guy took up so much room. I didn't notice, but the big guy said, hey, man, you're a little light. And he said, what you mean? He said, other guy jumped out the window where we were at on scene. So what happened was the other guy, the smaller guy, he rolled down the window because the window lock weren't activated. He crawled out the window with handcuffs and eventually made an escape. Now, we had to, because of the dynamics of everything, he was being charged with a felony at the time for the stolen vehicle, and we had to kind of broadcast it everywhere. Eventually, he was caught with the handcuffs on. Everything was good. However, now the officer has to answer up to the fact that he let somebody escape out of his car. He got in a little trouble, not a lot of trouble. We did what we could to help him out, and I felt bad that he transported these 2 guys from me, and one of them, well, actually, he didn't transport 2, right? He just transported 1. The other one left at the scene, but chalking another one up for the good guys. We're going to win in the end. It was very problematic to have to find this guy, but we did. Let's move to the next one. This next one's pretty funny, man. All right, so we're on a call, Chris Rogers and myself, along with one of my sergeants. We're on a call. We eventually had to get physical with a guy, and he was strung out on drugs and stuff. We get physical with him in some capacity, and eventually we gave him a misdemeanor summons, if I remember correctly, and sent him on his way. But there was a little hands-on activity with this guy because he was so out of it, he just wasn't listening. I don't think he meant to be disruptive. He just was because of the nature of the drugs that he was on, right? So fast forward a few days, we get to roll call. We work day shift at the time. We get to roll call and find out that a guy had escaped the precinct the night before. Well, when they put the picture out of him, it was clear to me, and I went and told my friend, Chris Rogers, I said, Chris, you recognize this guy? He said, nope. And I said, this is the guy that we had to struggle with the other day, the one that we met at the hotel, right? You don't remember him? He said, no, I don't remember him. And I said, well, just focus, bro. This is the guy that escaped. So I happened to be in the precinct, and the captain walked in, and I said, hey, man, what's up with this guy? And he said, basically, he just walked out the door. Nobody was paying attention to him, and he was able to just walk out the door. They have since changed some of the security measures to make it a little bit harder to do. But on that particular day, he just walked out the door. And what happened was, as I'm talking to the captain, he says, you got any idea what this guy is? I said, nah, but I said, it's not really worth putting out an extensive manhunt for this guy because this dude's a crackhead. He's on crack, and he's got a surface. He can't hide. He doesn't have any money. He doesn't have any resources. he'll surface and we'll see him just walking around one day. Well, luckily, Chris and I had that conversation in the hallway because a couple of days later, Chris is getting off the interstate and some fool walks in front of him and almost makes him hit him as he's getting off the interstate. And as luck would have it, guess who it is? It's the escapee. Chris recognizes him. Chris takes him into custody. So Chris is the hero for the day. But he said, man, it's a good thing you told me about that guy in the hallway because I would have never remembered that it was him. I'd have probably sent that guy on his way. So that's just one of them funny stories that you can't hardly make it up, man. So we had to deal with the guy. He escaped. I knew he was going to resurface. That's what crackheads do. They resurface because they have to come out sooner or later. Like I said, no resources. And luckily, I indicated to Chris who he was, and Chris remembered seeing that wanted poster, and Chris got officer today for that apprehension. So Chris Rogers, if you're listening, and you better be listening, boy, kudos on that arrest. Now, the next one I'm going to tell you about, this one kind of pissed me off. I had an officer working under my direction. There was a big fight. Eventually, a female was handcuffed, and I told the officer to secure the female because she was combative, and we were arresting her for some type of violence that occurred. Well, the officer said something back to me. She was a little distance away. And then ultimately the lady took off running upstairs to re-engage the people that she had been fighting. And I told the officer, run faster and catch her, right? But she don't catch her. She lets her get all the way up the stairs. She's handcuffed, but she's actively engaged in the people that had actually called the cops on her and what she was being arrested for. She became combative with them. My officers are having a hard time dealing with her. And I come up and I grab her by the arm. Well, as soon as I grab her by the arm from the left, I could see out of my peripheral, I see a fist coming toward my face. And this lady's daughter, who's a teenager, I don't know exactly how old she was, she punched me in my left cheek. I saw it coming. I couldn't stop it because my hands were occupied trying to break this lady up from this fight because it had become quite the scene inside of there. We were in a small contained area, small house, small kitchen, and everybody's fighting. There's probably about, I guess, 8 or 10 people in there, plus the officers. Well, eventually I disengaged with the female after the girl hit me, and I took her into custody, and I think she realized the error of her ways, but she was still a smart aleck. She was mad because we were grabbing her mom, basically, and I said, why would you hit me? We wasn't even hitting your mom. All I was doing was grabbing her by the arm. But, you know, whenever you're in situations like that, I'm always say the hood is the hood. And that's where we were at, and that's what this situation was. We were in an area that they live by their own rules sometimes, but it is a rule. Don't hit the police because we're going to hit back, and we're going to make sure that your life is disrupted by going to jail, period. So that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is this. The female and her daughter are both brought back to the Highland Road precinct. They're housed in separate rooms. Eventually, the mother, the older lady who was the one who escaped the grasp of the cop earlier, is in the holding cell. And the officer comes to me and says, hey, do you know where my prisoner's at? Thinking that maybe I pulled the prisoner out to question or whatever. I said, I have no idea where your prisoner's at. It's your prisoner, not mine. And now I'm still kind of pissed at this officer for letting me get hit in the face, right? So I'm not wanting to have a big interaction with him. But the officer says, well, I can't find her. And I said, what do you mean you can't find her? So we looked around the precinct, and this lady had escaped. Luckily, we had enough people that were in the area. We scoured the area. We got back in our patrol units, and one of the officers on our squad caught this female running down Highland Road. So we were able to reapprehend her. This female was allowed to escape twice by the same officer. You got to get better, officer. Do your job right. Don't just do it right. These are just a few examples of how things can go bad during the course of your day that can actually impact you, because people get written up, they get suspended, and you can get up to termination for escapees, right? So officers out there, young officers, don't make the same mistakes we made. You heard some of these funny stories. Always secure your prisoners. Make sure that your windows are locked and that your door, the child activation locks, are locked so they can't just open the door. Most of the units now don't have door handles, but they do have the power window up and down mechanism. So make sure your windows are locked so they can't let yourself out. And look, it's all in a day's work. Sometime you win, sometime you lose. But like I said earlier, you can run, but you can't hide. We will get you in the end. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Big Head on the Block. I'm Tim Henderson, the host. I look forward to dropping another podcast soon. Please give us any comments, likes, dislikes, or any topics y'all would like to discuss. Thank you.